Hello and welcome to the DVD audio commentary for the Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax. My name is Jonathan Southcott and I'll be moderating this commentary.
I'm John Madden. I'm the director of this story, The Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax.
And I'm David Stewart Davis, the editor of Sherlock magazine, author of Bending the Willow, Jeremy Bright's Sherlock Holmes, and starring Sherlock Holmes.
The Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax was an interesting proposition as a film, because it was, I think it's safe to say, one of the weaker stories, which left us, Trevor Bone and myself, we felt some latitude, but I think also responsibility to kind of reconceive it as a film. And it has certain kind of features, really, that really means you've got to kind of build on what's there, on the foundation of what's there. In particular, it has this thing which attracted us both, which is that the heroes, Watson and Holmes, are actually separated in the story. Actually, in the original story, Watson which is set in Switzerland, Watson is sent off to investigate something. We like the idea of Watson being away on holiday on his own, in mufti, as it were, stumbling upon something that he was not entirely happy about and writing to Holmes. And we like the idea of externalizing, or giving kind of concrete, visual form to the thing that so many of the stories begin with, which is a sort of deductive tour de force by Holmes. So many of the stories begin that way. So you have this rather nice mechanism where a story is unfolding to us, the viewer, which is a visual story, which has certain clues and certain narrative indicators and so forth, which is being interpreted, of course, wrongly by Watson and communicated in letter form back to Holmes, who is busy developing and evolving his own interpretation of the story in terms of the little emblems that he's attributed to the major characters in it. We transpose the story to the Lake District, obviously for financial reasons, though the original idea had been to shoot the Lake District for Switzerland, and Trevor and I thought we might as well shoot the Lake District for the Lake District. I think why Watson would be going off for a bit of recuperation in Switzerland, a bit beyond his means, probably. Beautiful locations.
About whether Lady Frances would be as good as her word. Those of us foolish enough to doubt her were soon rebuked by the sight of the skiff moored in the shallows, and by the stern gaze of its captain when she greeted us within.
It's interesting that that theme you were talking about of Watson getting things wrong was in the original story. As you say, the original story, Holmes sends Watson off to Switzerland, to Lausanne and Baden, and to see if he can discover where Lady Frances Carfax has got to, where she's disappeared to. And Holmes himself follows on in disguise to watch Watson. And when Watson makes a mess of it, he comes out of disguise and saves him from being knocked about by someone. And saying, "You've made a real mess of it." And I think you and Trevor did that very subtly in this by, as you say, these messages, Holmes is interpreting correctly where Watson is missing the point, isn't it?
Yes, this man here is obviously the one who, well, actually in the story we're led to believe that he's the villain as well.
Yes.
But there was a nice way here that we could tell that it's as if you're always working with the idea that Holmes can see into the future. And of course, the disaster happens while Watson is looking the other way. We like the sort of bizarreness of this, though, the idea that Schlesinger, who appears to be, of course, the humane saviour of the damsel in distress who falls out of her boat.
Help here!
I was helpless, my dear Holmes. Helpless. I have never felt so powerless in my
This sort of
life.
wonderful image of him careering down the jetty and plunging into the water to swim with his super strong upper body, which Watson takes as being an indicator of his extraordinarily noble character. Doubtless Holmes spots as something else. But again, it gave you great visual possibilities.
And interesting as well, as Holmes and Watson are separate, the miles apart, as it were, but the cross-cutting between the two bonds them together somehow,
Yes.
and with the use of the letters. Now,
Yes.
interestingly, I was on the set the day that this particular scene was filmed, and I think I refer to it as the organised chaos of television, because it took the whole morning just for one shot, for one of these little ornaments to fall off the mantelpiece onto a newspaper. And I thought, well, that's where the money goes. It was true.
Well, I think I mean, obviously that's true of filmmaking, generally speaking. The more... it was one of the sort of weird things is that working at a very small scale is often much more demanding than working at a big scale.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to, which obviously I was, get an equivalency in screen size between these chess pieces or little ornaments and the actual people, and there are a lot of visual motifs where one hands over to the other, you're dealing with terribly, terribly shallow focal depths and so forth, so it's very difficult to get it happening precisely right. And as Jeremy, as ever, was your greatest ally in that, because he would be unsatisfied if the little blue figure fell onto the wrong part of the paper. And so if the alliance of him and me going for it again and again and again was one that the producer couldn't really argue with.
I remember him being incredibly tolerant, because there were sound problems, lighting problems, all kind of things, and he would just go through the motions without complaint. I just thought that was not just professional, but just brilliant, really.
Yes.
And how clever, really, I think, to just say, to hell with it. We're not going to pretend this is Switzerland, that this is the Lake District, because you've got this beautiful, as you say, locations which can speak for themselves without pretending to be elsewhere.
Well, that's right. That's right.
The hotel that they're staying at, was it not quite open or something? Was it?
We certainly had the full use of it, and I don't honestly recall exactly where it was. It was obviously in that area. But no, I don't. It was a good location. It had some very nice features to it.
Oh, my brother. That is duty too, of course.
And the other thing the script does, of course, is allow us to see Lady Frances Carfax, because in the original story...
Yeah, you never see her at all. That's absolutely right. Well, again, in order for us to care about who she was and about her disappearance, you obviously have to have got close to her, and she... Cheryl Campbell seemed a kind of perfect actress to cast for it, because she's amazingly sympathetic, I think. She's wonderful at playing capriciousness, which is a kind of, that impulsiveness that's a feature of the character. She's a great beauty. The liaison, the kind of instinctive human liaison between Watson and her is the kind of emotional backbone of the story, which obviously pays off very strongly at the end. We also, Trevor and I were kind of thinking of this as a kind of postmodern Holmes story, really, an opportunity to kind of take certain principles that the audience were used to in the storytelling form, the three-act structure, for example, and really kind of working with that in a kind of meta-textual way. That sounds insufferably pretentious, but we structured it so that the story takes the form of three successive disappearances. Each time the disappearance means something else, so that we're sort of turning the idea of disappearance around like the figures in the story.
I think you do real service to the original here, because the original is a bit of a piecemeal work.
Well, it's the coffin trick and not much more, really.
That's right, it is. And you really, in a sense, this episode, it goes on track to
his first line in the story. I just remember there.
Why, indeed.
There's a certain amount of controversy about leaving Holmes out of the story for so long, but that's, if you look at it on the page, that has to do with how many lines he's saying. He's, of course, dominating and controlling the story through silence and through his brain, really.
Watson, you're a brick.
I came here, Fanny, to see how you were, not to be lectured.
And once you get Jeremy on screen, you're hooked, aren't you? Whether he's saying anything or not, anyway.
Yes.
I suppose you've been overdoing
But
it.
yes, going back to the point, I think you did a great service to the Conan Doyle story, because this version is far better than the original, from a logical point of view and from a dramatic sort of...
Yes, well, one felt a huge amount of sympathy. I mean, I didn't have to direct all of the films, and he had to write all of the stories, so I think my achievement, if it is not really as notable. But I mean, I have felt for him, really, because he was obviously writing these in serial form. He had he was like any journalist. He had a deadline. He'd had to get something out by a certain point, and you feel that he obviously, towards the end of his time with the material, put things off as late as he possibly could, as one tends to do.
Good afternoon.
Didn't really kind of give as much thought to this as he did to some of the others, but that just leaves you more of an opportunity in a way.
Indeed, yes. I mean, the original story was published in the end of 1911, which is quite a while after he originally started to write the story. This is Conan Doyle started to write the stories, and by that time he was really just writing them occasionally, and usually just for money. I mean, obviously all writers write for money, but just for money, really, in a sense,
I'm sure he'd got to the point where he didn't want to be kind of trapped or identified by that character, just as an actor doesn't always want to be.
Well, of course, he killed Holmes off, and then was persuaded
to bring him back.
And it was mainly, the incredible amounts of money from various publishers this side of the Atlantic and in America.
It's an old story. That's the way it always works.
Yes. And so he wasn't perhaps as careful with plotting as he had been perhaps earlier.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's the coffin trick, which is very clever, and but this sort of really fleshes out the Schlesinger too, the villain, because you don't get much of him in the story either.
No, you don't. No, Eddie Peters.
And it was nice to see Julian Curry doing something, because he was a renegade from Rumpole of the Bailey, wasn't he?
He was, and actually, for those who might live in the area, you can still hear his voice on the district line, telling you to stand clear of the doors.
Really?
Yeah.
That's Julian.
I travel in from Turnham Green, and you can hear it's his voice. I know it very well from filming this story. The marvellous thing about being an actor in London, you get to work in all kinds of different zones, earning your money from different areas.
Thank you. As inspiring as I predicted. I regret to say that the rigours of his itinerary press hard upon Major Schlesinger.
Yes, we obviously built up the Schlesinger story a lot, and the notion of him as a wheelchair-bound person gave us lots of opportunities in the story as well.
And the nice thing was that with the commercial break comes just as Watson and Holmes get together.
Yeah,
with the as you say, with the true disappearance.
Well, it's also, we sort of wanted the idea that she disappeared and Holmes arrives in the void that she's left, because obviously the whole of the first part of the story is dealing with a vacuum, is dealing with another disappearance, which is Holmes, as it were.
Last resort. My very last resort. How can you suggest it?
Rome! Where the devil are you?
And we were telling a kind of a different arc with the Holmes story here, the man himself, who is, classically defined by an extraordinary confidence, experiencing a momentary setback and then emerging in triumph, with an almost sort of mystical ability to unravel the story. And we took that a little bit further in this one. I mean, it does have those lineaments, I suppose, but obviously it arrives at a different conclusion, which was something I remember Jeremy being very attracted to. I mean, the idea that he fails, in fact.
And before this was the first one to be filmed, was it not? Of the case.
I think it was.
And before that, he'd been quite ill.
He had, and that lent a certain kind of quality to the undertaking. He just discovered that he had a fairly serious bipolar condition, which plunged him from, elation to depression, which I suppose had always been a feature of who he was, but I don't think he or anybody really understood that had a clinical basis. I think the melancholy of the story he liked. I also thought Patrick Gowers was very excited by this film. We were working with sort of certainly mysterious kind of quality that the story has. I suppose they all have a mysterious quality, but he's using a kind of musical texture. This is the shot you were referring to that took many takes to get right. But he's using a musical texture that he's not really used before. It's actually a synthesizer because he usually works with a very classical palette. But it's very effective, the score of this film, I think.
We just see Mrs. Hudson there.
Yes.
Jeremy was always very happy to have Mrs. Hudson in the scene. He sort of felt that she gave balance to the Baker Street scenes,
Yes, he did.
The feminine influence, as it were.
This is one of the many thousands of brilliant locations you can find in Manchester. This is the library and the university, and now disused library, I seem to remember, that we could take over. Again, we liked, Trevor and I were trying to find ways of just telling the story visually without the necessity of enormous numbers of words. You can only do that because the audience already understands that Holmes would leave without bothering that policeman. So you can jump the story forward faster, and the audience has sort of a smile of recognition ready. We were really restricted here in terms of how we could shoot this set. Although it had originally been built for the series, the Baker Street set, in a kind of classic reflection, I suppose, of modern economic theory. It had been cannibalized by the Granada Tours backlot attraction, and so was now a tourist attraction. And when it needed to be used again for filming purposes, they had to pay large facilities fees to Granada Tours to do so.
That really upset Michael Cox, who
I think with good reason.
Yes, of course, because he'd been responsible for the construction of it in the first place, and then he had to pay. He told me £1,000 a day to film on it.
Yes. There was a lovely thing about the geography of this hotel. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It worked in a sort of points of the compass kind of format, so you could use these shots where, you went round and round and round the compass until eventually you come to the centre point. There's the character at the centre who has, of course, disappeared.
And Watts makes a very believable sort of tourist and holiday, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. He does. Well, he's always believable in any role that the reader might imagine themselves in.
Did Lady Frances pay her bill?
No, sir.
Did she order any transport?
No, sir.
And she took none of her luggage?
We think not, sir.
This is the classic moment, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. There was an even better version of this shot that I couldn't use for continuity purposes. There was a morning mist when we first shot this setup. This wide shot, which is really spectacular, but it didn't match with that shot. By the time we came to shoot this shot, the mist had gone, so we had to go back and shoot the wide shot again, as you often do. This is, again, Jeremy. See the little gnats on the water surface there, but it's an example of how you can use the dynamic of a two-shot, that both of them immediately understood how to do that, the way Watson turns away at the moment of deduction, so that there's a sort of dynamic jump when... But we're also working here with something that you couldn't use very often, which is Watson's emotional investment in the story. Because of the relationship, the special relationship that he developed with her, that's kind of driving the story forward, and actually, of course, becomes a kind of rebuke to Holmes at the end of the story, because Holmes's relationship with the story has been largely theoretical. And he's failed because he hasn't actually invested sufficiently in the human plight, really.
Well, this is a brilliant difference between Holmes and Watson, isn't it? I mean, not just in the Granada, but in their characters, in all presentations. Holmes is the mind. He describes himself as a brain with the body as just a mere appendix at one point, and Watson is the human form, and this is nicely touched on in this particular story. More so, as I say, than in the Doyle version.
Protect and guide her. She's the inevitable inciter of crime in others. I treat the disappearance of your sister with utmost seriousness.
Do you think I do not?
And we're fleshing out characters here.
Yeah, the Earl of Rufton is only mentioned in passing, but was obviously a very useful tool for us. I mean, it's one of the first things you do when you're adapting these stories is scan the text for characters who might be useful to you. There was the schoolmaster who gives Holmes the information about bicycles in the Priory School's another example of that. But we were obviously able to develop that just to get at the sense of who Green was, this man on horseback, who is the MacGuffin of the story, of course.
So how closely did you work with Trevor? I mean, how much input did you have in the actual scripting of it?
Well, in this one, very closely, because there wasn't a script, or perhaps there was a script, which I don't think Trevor was particularly happy with. And when they first approached me about it, I think Trevor sort of sent a message to me via Michael Cox that, not to consider that this was wholly written anyway. So we got together very early on, and I said, look, I think there's an opportunity to do some different things here, something kind of special, and he had a real appetite for that. So we mapped it out pretty carefully, and kind of reconceived the story. And because we were, as I said, under a kind of responsibility, we felt to make the story viable, because it really wasn't viable as a subject for adaptation, really. We also felt that we had the latitude, to do more with it.
When you were breaking the back of the story and forming it, presumably one thing you must be at the back of your mind is we want decent enough parts to attract decent enough actors to to guest star in it.
Absolutely.
I told her if she wanted money, she could sell this. It's a priceless collection. That was designed for the French royal family by Fragonard. We acquired it all at the Revolution. And now it's hers. What I have is owls. Owls in the East Wing. Want to see the owls?
Where does she keep them? Does she travel with them?
No.
But then where are they kept?
This, I think we're about to go to just another amazing location of the kind that you can just sort of trip over up in the Manchester-Liverpool area, which you'll probably know where it is. It's one of the big buildings on the water side. I think the one with the liver birds on it, possibly, which stood in for the Oxford and Lombard Maritime Bank in Pall Mall, which is a fabulous location, which, just gives you such kind of visual richness. Yes, I think that's where they're about to go. It opens its doors in 3 hours or something. Yes, this is a good cut. Nice kind of. This is the bank opening in the morning, and the heroine goes to the epicenter of the story and stops. I mean, I remember we built this around. There is a moment, of course, where Watson accosts the Green character in the original story, but we kind of shaped that idea into it, or put it into a new context here. We thought that the bank was a very good place to have the characters collide again, and of course this is the second time where she could or should be saved.
Yes.
The first one being in when she falls out of the boat, and she's within their grasp here, and because of Watson's decency and kind of outrage at what's happened to her, he actually blows the entire thing and she gets away again. But this is an absolute gift visually, this location. Had an acoustic that was spectacular. The light, it sort of lit itself for you.
And it also almost reflects the hotel.
Totally. No, absolutely. That was one of the things that we kind of jumped at. So you're constantly working with this idea of revolution in this film, things turning around, and
the script gives Edward a chance to be emotional and angry.
Well, this is the moment where it's as if Holmes knows that this is going to have a disastrous result, but none of them can know quite how disastrous.
And this almost reflects part of the Conan Doyle story, where the two men.
And this is the moment actually in the story where Holmes reappears or appears in a different context. But again, the framing possibilities this offered you, the fact that she's, they're looking down on her to begin with, and she's looking down on them. It's just very nice. Sometimes a location like that can be just incredibly exciting for what it offers you, and that's the one moment of connection between them.
And again, so much of it is told by visuals.
Mm-hmm.
You must have pared down the dialogue quite a bit, really.
We did. We set ourselves that task, actually, to do it with as few words as we possibly could, because it was a relatively simple story to tell.
Because there's always a problem with the Holmes stories, that they can be terribly wordy, sort of. And then he went into the room, and what did you see, and so forth.
Yes, or the backstory takes an enormous amount of explaining. Yes. We always follow the principle of trying to get the backstory to the front as far as possible, so the whole of the first act of this film tells you really what you need to know about Lady Frances, so you've got the guns loaded and you can start to tell the story more viscerally and cinematically in the second part of it.
She's disappeared again, and that is that.
Now, when they when you filmed this, the set, the Baker Street set, had moved out of Granada, hadn't it? And it was in some other building.
It was in what was known as the Bonded Warehouse, yes, which is not it's one of the many buildings that the kind of voracious Granada television consumed all around it. It was one of the big disused bonded warehouses from the days when it was such a preeminent,
incredibly detailed set.
It was, and always the masterstroke, I think, was that the walls were papered in brown paper, ordinary brown, reversed brown paper, of the kind that you wrap. It just was a texture that worked incredibly well for the camera, where a flat brown paint would not have done. It just had enough texture in the paper and in the patterning to kind of lift it visually. But it was murderous from a sound point of view, because it was not soundproof by any means. This wanted to be moved here. It was a sort of sad thing, really, about had to move on with the times, but there was a sense that this series was sort of camping at Granada, really, because there wasn't a home for it anymore.
To be rid of me. I lost her somewhere near Southwark Bridge.
Southwark? Oh, that is most interesting.
Why?
I'm reliably informed as usual.
Yes, well, Michael Cox, the producer, had ceased to be an employee of Granada and had come as a sort of freelance producer to do it.
Yes.
And it was the last series he did.
Well, it was the time of transition, wasn't it, when the great kind of institutional... Well, it was not. It was really, wasn't it, when the whole broadcasting infrastructure was breaking up into more individual pieces and separate production companies and so forth, and the umbrella kind of principle of financing all of these things from in-house was really breaking up by now.
It's to save her. We have driven her into the hands of her worst enemy.
But we saw her free.
My dear Watson, a person may walk over the edge of a cliff because they've been invited to gaze at the moon. Her eyes may be open, but she is, I believe...
You obviously enjoyed doing these. I mean, were you offered any other episodes that you couldn't do, or...?
Yes, I think I was, but I didn't really remember now, to be honest. But yes, I think I was. And, I really enjoyed doing them, but I ended up doing 2, which I was quite happy about, really.
And with the same writer, which...
Yes. Yes, same writer, and I'm sure most of the same crew that I shot them with as well. And this is where the figures come back again.
Schlesinger is also known as the Reverend Joseph Covington. Amos Callow, the Dean of Maseru, and Edmund, the Bishop of Lima.
Now, how was that conceived?
That was my idea, I seem to remember. I just thought it was a good... What you don't want, obviously, is if you were going to start with the idea that Watson was going to be telling a story and Holmes was going to be listening to it, you didn't simply want endless shots of Holmes reading a letter. And it seemed, as I say, a good way of just externalizing his thought processes. And, you're always looking when you're making for a film of ways of telling story visually. We also figured out that we could have him arrive at the notion of what the coffin, the coffin story, the thing that he'd missed. He misses in the original story as in the film, that he doesn't spot the clue when it's there in front of him. And there was a nice opportunity to be able to tell that story visually as well.
At Glasgow, bound for South America. She was lost overboard the first night at sea.
But like the other film that you did, the Priory School, we do get both sides of Holmes in this episode. I mean, I know, ultimately, I suppose you could say he does fail, but he is very much a thinker and then very much a man of action. We saw him rushing to the bank, and later we see him rushing to the grave. Yeah. It's and that balance is so essential for a really good Holmes film, because either one is overemphasized in failing the other.
At last, gentlemen! At last.
Where was it pawned?
Riley's of Stockwell. It was, by my calculation, the 27th shop I tried.
There is it with his scarf again. He was so fond of that scarf.
He was.
And again, it's very uncanonical, but he'd gone back to the long hair.
Yes.
Because he cut that short, didn't he, for some of the episodes.
It's definitely Jeremy was working here when we were sort of pushing him towards a sense of tension in the character, that he's, not quite on top of it. He arrives always too late. I mean, he arrives too late at the beginning because she's disappeared. Watson disappeared at the end of the first part. And the second part, which, given his degree of focus on the heroine, you only had that extraordinary fleeting moment where he sees her, and because he's lost his concentration for a moment, she disappears again. So by now, the tension of not being in front of the story is beginning to show in what he's doing. He's kind of out of sorts, you can see it, which I think Jeremy kind of found something he could quite easily play, because he was letting himself back into the story again, the whole routine, after a long absence with some, sobering news for himself in between.
Now my stupidity has driven her into the arms of a murderer. What can I do? Is there nothing I can do?
Just doesn't she know you by sight?
No.
Ah, well, then there is something that you can do. But it will demand great patience.
Well, the popular conception of Holmes, of course, is that he's the ultimate reasoner and he never fails. But that is not true even in the Conan Doyle canon. I mean, the first short story that Conan Doyle ever wrote, The Scandal in Bohemia, a woman gets the better of him. He actually... And so it was amazing that story was such a success that led on to all the other stories.
Yes.
When you've got a detective who shows himself brilliant in so many ways, but fails.
Yes.
And I suppose you've got elements of that in this too.
Yes. Well, I think it humanises the character, of course, as well.
Which is essential.
Yeah. think this was probably a set we'd shot this on, but a lot of the footage that you now see coming up was shot in an area of Liverpool, which is heavily used as period London. Not even sure whether it still exists, actually, but there were several streets there which were kind of...
Well, absolutely.
You know, pretty unreconstructed, where you could get away with minimal dressing for Victorian London.
The cobble streets and stuff. I mean, when I first went on set with the Granada series, it was in Liverpool for shots in the Hound of the Baskervilles, and it was in similar territory. And the recent BBC Hound of the Baskervilles, which was filmed in 2002, used a whole street which was regarded as Baker Street because of the cobbled streets, and the houses looked so it is very much still...
Well, certainly there's a street here which could have probably stood in for Baker Street had they not already built the back lot.
It was comical because a lot of the extras who were dressed obviously as down and out Victorian ladies and gentlemen went into the pub at lunchtime and no one batted an eyelid as the usual people.
This is one of those streets, or no? It's not the one I'm thinking of. No, there's this one here. This is the one where the Schlesingers live. It's an amazing location, really.
And this is something that Michael would not have had to have done earlier, because he could have probably just reworked the Baker Street set, possibly.
I think it was tough, actually. The Baker Street set was so heavily used and recognisable, and I suppose that was intended to be so. I mean, you didn't even have to go into much of the usual stuff that you do of getting rid of yellow lines, and, you know, almost every period movie you now see always has the telltale kind of compost on the road in order to cover up the tarmac.
Yes, the yellow lines and so forth.
Mr. Green, we can do nothing without a warrant.
This is intolerable. Until we have some...
We also used to love the Brill cream in his hair, because that did the most wonderful highlights to his head always. Yeah, there, for example, when he's got his back to the camera.
One often forgets, because of the sort of jolly boys adventure element of the Sherlock Holmes story, how dark some of them were. And this is a particularly cruel and dark story.
It is, and it's a very dark story.
And ends, as we'll see, very sort of bleakly.
Yes, it does. More bleakly than the book does, actually. We let it go there.
Tomorrow may indeed be too late.
I'm well aware of it.
This lovely moving around each other there.
Yes.
They're still antagonistic, aren't they, towards each other? It's wonderful.
Blocking is the most important thing you do in a film. I think it often overlooked, really, just the simple dynamics of the way people move relative to each other.
8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Brixton Cemetery.
I don't think that, and I'm a great fan of Basil Rathbone, but I don't think that you'll get, as dressed as they are now, two actors on film who looked so great as Holmes and Watson, as these two here. That's wonderful. That's the Watson of Conan Doyle.
I think so.
I fancy that you've been misdirected, sir. Possibly if you tried further down the street.
That will do. We have no time to waste. You are Henry Peters, late Major Albert Schlesinger, veteran.
We was kind of, we were playing with the idea. Obviously, we know this man, of course, does not need a wheelchair.
Yes, right.
So we revealed it at the end of the previous part, but it's kind of nice watching him sort of stagger his way back to the chair and lift his legs up to plonk them on the footrests.
Your name does not frighten me, Mr. Holmes. I have nothing to hide. What is your business?
I'm looking for the Lady Frances Carfax.
I'm delighted to hear it. If anyone can find her, I imagine you can. Perhaps you'd be so good as to tell me when you do. I've a note against her for nearly £100.
She's got such a great face, Julian Perry.
This presumably was not a set, but a house.
This was a house, yeah. Those lines there are actually from the original book, as I remember. A pair of, nothing to show for it, but a pair of trumpery pendants that the pawnbroker would hardly look at. The woman's a leech.
There he goes, yeah.
Enough for me.
I salute your powers of improvisation, sir, and your effrontery, but it will not do.
Oh, I'm perfectly serious. You find her, and I'm your debtor.
I mean to go through this house until I do.
You have a warrant?
This will serve until a better one comes.
And it's lovely to. Well, here we go with Watson getting his gun out on that line. Have you a warrant? And this is our warrant. Watson was always reaching for a weapon in situations like this. It was in the.
He was always the one who carried the weapon. Yes, absolutely right.
Holmes, yes, Holmes would say, "Bring a gun," but he would never carry one himself.
That's right.
Force your way into my home. That you threaten me at gunpoint. Must you also now invade the peace of the dead?
Well,
I shall not tell you.
hold him here, Watson.
I don't believe you do.
Could you talk a little bit, John, about the differences between working on this series and the previous series? How did it change the kind of atmosphere?
Well, as I said earlier, there was a sense of everybody kind of coming back to the genre here after a kind of very uncertain period in Jeremy's health, which I think cast a certain kind of atmosphere over the proceedings. I think from my point of view, because I'd already made one of these films, I had a certain kind of appetite for doing something specific with it, and you get a little bit more informed about what you're doing, I suppose. It had a kind of perhaps more of a sense of an occasion about it, because I think everybody realised this would be the last series, really. So the atmosphere was perhaps slightly more charged.
I remember I was at the graveside, as it were, when you were filming, and the lady we just saw in the coffin there, that little old lady. I don't know whether I remember, but I do remember she said to presumably you, "Do you want me with my teeth in or out?"
That's right, I remember that.
And I think you said without. Yes.
Well, it's a good opportunity,
Yeah.
You couldn't really create that effect.
That was so interesting to me because there was as usual. Sorry.
It's all right. No, I just remember this is a kind of a nice sequence now where, which actually happens in pretty much every story, one way or another, where Holmes has to kind of go quiet to think it through again. This is the equivalent in the Inspector Morse series of What Have We Got, Lewis? When they go over the ground just to remind everybody of where it is. This is obviously the opportunity we had to come back to the figures again. And he's very pissed off with himself here, Holmes.
That great profile.
The old lady. It may be that this burial has no connection with Lady Frances's disappearance after all. I mean, she was, as you know, the most unpredictable creature. It may be that she had second thoughts about Schlesinger.
And I was saying with the filming at the graveyard, there was obviously a lot of hanging about. I do remember a family coming through with some kids. We saw these funny men in costumes and so forth. And that's Sherlock Holmes, said the mother. And Jeremy was brilliant with the children and chatted with them and signed bits of paper.
Yes.
While he was waiting to do his bit.
Such a common sight, of course, nowadays, film crews.
Well, that's right, yes.
There was always a good line in most of the Conan Doyle stories where Holmes kind of upbraids himself for his slow-wittedness.
I've been as blind as a beetle.
As blind as a beetle in the Priory School, and this one has an absolutely marvellous formulation where he says, "What has become of any brains that God has given me?"
You think there's something you've overlooked?
In must be one of the tightest frames he's ever had to work in, does quite brilliantly. It's just coming up, I think. But I like it's always nice when you can construct these stories in such a way that you keep taking the audience back to the beginning. This is one of the sort of more postmodern aspects where we didn't understand what these figures meant to begin with.
It's late. And
Should have been there before now.
It's just a nice way, rather than having to do this kind of deduction in dialogue, you can actually involve the audience in it. This is the key lines that he's forgotten that he's hearing here, of course. And this is what Jeremy does with this frame is brilliant, I think. Just lifts his mouth into the shot.
Brains that God has given me.
The eyes appropriately bloodshot, yes, exactly.
So rather like the Priory School, we're now onto the chase, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely.
O God most mighty, O holy, O merciful Saviour.
Where we shot this must have been in Manchester.
It was a graveyard in Manchester, yes,
Right.
just on the outskirts, yes. I remember Cheryl Campbell sitting on one of the gravestones knitting while she was waiting for her bit.
And never continueth in one stay. In the midst of life we are in death. Of whom may we seek for succour, but of thee, O Lord, who for our sins art justly displeased. Yet, O Lord God, most
I was very, very insistent. My stepmother has a thing about suitcases looking too light in film, so I insisted that they put sandbags in that coffin to make sure that the pallbearers really had difficulty manhandling it.
It really is grim and gruesome to think, in reality, supposedly.
Well, that's exactly the point.
Someone is in there, yeah.
dust to dust, in sure and certain hope.
Stop! Raise that coffin!
What the devil do you mean by this sacrilege?
Murder, sir! Murder is what I mean. Why such a deep coffin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a horrible, horrible image, really. But we felt we wanted that, the kind of, the nastiness of that to kind of percolate through the end of the film. So that, you know, the true lovers are reunited, but with a terrible, terrible disappearance as the price to be paid. There's a little reference back to the bicycle in the Priory School there, actually. I wonder what tyre prints the
and
wheelchair would have been.
Doesn't he shoot him, I think?
Yes, he does, yes.
Stop or I'll shoot!
Gives him a fair chance.
And suitably in the leg.
Yeah.
This is where I like this because the story just jumps forward somewhere you don't expect now. Holmes just goes into his own world. He doesn't even bother to.
Yes, he's sort of, in a sense, typical of Holmes. His job is done, in a sense. Isn't it?
Yes.
He's found the lady who's disappeared, and that's the be all and end all of his involvement.
It's chloroform. She's known literally the terrors of the grave. God knows what this will have done to her.
I failed.
It's the fear of emotion, isn't it?
Yes.
With Holmes.
Okay, that's such a clever delivery, that, because instead of "I have failed" being a kind of tragic moment, he plays it as kind of surprise, as if he's just discovered some clue that was perfectly obvious to him.
Which is one of the most beautiful on this planet. There has been a great improvement as a result. A landscape so familiar and so
rather coveted, that boat.
And this is a lovely cyclical reminder of how the whole thing started with the boat.
Kind and dutiful.
But what a difference from a bright lady who's having difficulty with the beginning to this sort of, and the wheelchair coming in as a sort of
she's the
motif
one
as well.
Exactly.
All this happened. Finally, please accept the enclosed as a token of my gratitude for your saving of my dear Francis, Mr. Holmes. And I look forward to our entertainment of you and Dr. Watson in a happier future.
I cannot accept it. I refuse to be rewarded for fostering a tragedy. I've never suffered such a complete eclipse of my faculties.
Like any eclipse,
So he's blaming himself. but nevertheless not really showing any sympathy towards the...
Well, that's right, because the sublime egotist, it's his failure rather than her tragedy that is the problem.
Well, Michael Cox said it was one of the most controversial episodes that he did because you did so much with it.
Yes.
But I think also it's one of the most successful because of that.
Well, I think it's interesting as it sort of stands slightly to the left of the genre and kind of comments on it. I certainly feel the most pleased with this one in a funny kind of a way because one was able to get something out of, less that was there on the plate to begin with. A more substantial meal emerges, and I like the conclusion of it very much. It's kind of unexpectedly affecting, and it's also unusual to end on the subject of the story rather than the Holmes and Watson. And also to hold the image for as long as that was a nice opportunity to do that.
And being the first one of the series, it really sort of, it was a dramatic and bold move, I think, to show that.
Yes.
Because he broke quite a few molds in doing it.
Yes.
I mean, the sort of client did not come to Baker Street. Holmes and Watson were not there discussing it to begin with. It was, excellent.
So any kind of final thoughts on the film today? You're still very pleased with it.
One doesn't want to make claims for them beyond what they are. It's just very satisfying working with genre material, From a filmmaking standpoint, it's one of the things that British television does incredibly well, and genre material is a very exacting form because there are rigid conventions that you have to work with. You're kind of sharpening your storytelling skills in terms of them. So just speaking personally, it's fun to look at those things because you have to work within certain constraints, but that often produces the most powerful things. Any story you're telling within, I suppose, certain agreed conventions, but in these the conventions are very tight.
Okay. John Madden, David Stuart Davis, thank you very much.
Thank you.